A 6-3 Supreme Court decision just ripped apart one of the biggest federal gun rules in recent memory. And if you think that means every gun law vanished overnight, that mistake could put you in serious trouble fast. Quick question before we continue. Are you subscribed? Because what I am about to explain could save you. Hit that button now, because most gun owners hear the headline, miss the details, and the details are where people get burned. Here is what just happened. The Supreme Court ruled 6-3 in a case called Garland versus Cargill. The court said the federal government went too far when the ATF treated bump stocks like machine guns under existing federal law. That is the part blowing up all over the internet right now. Now, let me break that down in normal English. A bump stock is an attachment that helps a shooter fire a semi-automatic rifle much faster. It does not turn the rifle into a true full auto weapon in the mechanical sense. Instead, it uses recoil and pressure from the shooter to help the trigger move faster. That difference became the whole fight. After the Las Vegas shooting in 2017, the federal government changed course. The ATF had not treated bump stocks as machine guns before. Then it reversed itself and issued a rule. The rule said from now on, bump stocks count as machine guns. That rule forced owners to destroy them or turn them in. If they did not, they could face criminal penalties. That is where Michael Cargill came in. He challenged the rule, and the case made it all the way to the Supreme Court. The justices were not really deciding whether bump stocks are smart, safe, or morally okay. They were deciding something narrower, but very important. Did the law Congress already wrote actually cover bump stocks? The majority said no, and that is why this case matters so much. The court did not say, "We love bump stocks." It said, the ATF cannot rewrite the law on its own. That is a huge difference. Here's the part nobody is talking about enough. This was not a broad ruling that erased all federal gun laws. It did not wipe out background checks. It did not wipe out the machine gun ban. It did not wipe out state bans. It struck down one federal rule because the court said the agency went beyond the words Congress actually passed. That means if your state bans bump stocks, that state ban can still be enforced. This is where people get careless. They hear one big headline and think they are free and clear. They are not. Imagine you live in a state that still bans bump stocks, or you travel into one. If you rely on a viral post instead of checking your own state law, you could still end up charged under state law. Do not make that mistake. Most people think Supreme Court cases work like a giant on and off switch. They do not. Sometimes the court changes everything. Sometimes it changes one lane on one road and leaves the rest alone. This case changed a major lane, yes, but it did not bulldoze the whole highway. Now, this is where it gets interesting. The majority focused on two phrases in the federal machine gun law. First, the law talks about firing more than one shot by a single function of the trigger. Second, it talks about firing automatically. The justices said a rifle with a bump stock does not fit that wording. Why? Because, in the majority view, the trigger still has to reset and move again for each shot, and the shooter still has to keep steady forward pressure. In simple terms, the gun is doing separate trigger actions. The bump stock helps the shooter do it faster, but it does not turn each burst into one single trigger function. That detail shocked a lot of people because functionally bump stocks can make firing incredibly fast. The dissenting justices leaned hard into that point. They basically said, look, the practical result is obvious. The shooter can send rounds rapidly with one continuous motion. So to them, the law should cover it. That is why the vote split 6-3. But here's the crazy part that gun owners need to hear. The court was not saying Congress is powerless. In fact, the message was almost the opposite. If Congress wants bump stocks banned clearly, Congress can rewrite the law and do it directly. So if you think this issue is over forever, slow down. It may only be in the next chapter. If you're finding this helpful, imagine what you will learn in my next video about the 5 words that can protect you when police ask questions about your firearm. Subscribe so you do not miss it, because knowing the law is good, but knowing what to say matters more. Now let me explain why this matters beyond bump stocks. A lot of people saw this and shouted. They claimed the Supreme Court just blew up gun control. That is not true. The real message is more precise. Agencies do not get to stretch criminal laws however they want just because the issue is politically hot. That should matter to you whether you are pro-gun, anti-gun, or somewhere in the middle. Criminal law is supposed to be clear. If the government wants to ban something, the rule should come from Congress. The rule must be in plain words, not from an agency changing its mind years later. Here's a hypothetical example. Let us say the federal law bans item A. For years, the agency says item B is not item A. Then, after a major national event, the agency flips and says, actually, item B is item A now. That kind of switch is exactly what made this case so explosive. And here's what most people get wrong. They turn this into a pure Second Amendment story. It was not, at least not mainly. This case was about statutory text. That means the actual words in the law. The court was asking, what did Congress really ban? Not, what do we wish Congress had banned? It was not about what feels close enough. It was about what the law actually said. That matters because a lot of your rights and a lot of your risks live in tiny wording differences. One phrase can change whether something is a felony or not. One comma can shape how a prosecutor reads a law. That sounds boring until your freedom depends on it. Now, quick legal note, this is educational information. Always consult an attorney for your specific situation. Good. Had to say that because YouTube is not a law office. Your facts matter. Your state matters. Your history matters. One bad assumption can cost you your rights. Let me give you a real-world scenario. Imagine you see the headline about the bump stock ban. You tell yourself, great, that means I am legal. Then you order one online and post it on social media. Then you take it to a range in a state that still bans it. Now the federal rule might be gone. But your state case just got stronger because you handed the evidence to them yourself. That is how people lose easy cases they never should have created. Here's another thing nobody wants to hear. Even when federal rules change, law enforcement and stores do not always move at the same speed. Some sellers stay cautious. Some states stay stricter. Some officers may not know the newest ruling immediately. That does not mean the ruling is fake. It means you should be smarter than the chaos. So what should you do right now? First, do not rely on headlines. Second, separate federal and state law. They are not the same thing. Third, understand that this case was about specific machine gun definitions. It was not a blank check for every gun part, accessory, or future lawsuit. Hey, 73% of people watching right now are not subscribed. Do not be part of that group. Join the gun owners who get these updates first, because when the law changes, those who hear it late pay for it. Click subscribe. But wait, there is something even more important regarding strike-downs. If you think this means the court is striking down every gun regulation now, recent cases prove that is wrong. Take Rahimi. In that case, the Supreme Court upheld a federal law that can disarm a person. This applies to people under domestic violence restraining orders when a court finds they are a threat. That is huge, because it shows the court is not saying the government can never disarm dangerous people. The court said some restrictions stand when they fit our legal tradition and target real danger. Now think about what that means for you. The court is not moving in a straight line. It is drawing distinctions, careful ones, technical ones, sometimes frustrating ones. That is why lazy headlines are so dangerous. Then there is the ghost gun case, Bondi v. Vanderstock. In that one, the Supreme Court upheld the federal rule dealing with certain weapon parts kits. It covered unfinished frames or receivers. Why does that matter? It proves the court is selective. The court is not just slamming the brakes on every ATF regulation. Sometimes the agency wins. It depends on the text, the product, and how far the rule reaches. This part shocked me. The same court that struck the bump stock rule upheld other gun restrictions in different contexts. That means the big lesson is not that everything changed. The lesson is that details matter more than ever. And that brings us to the biggest warning. Do not build your legal plan around slogans. Slogans like, the Supreme Court saved gun rights are too vague, or the ATF has no power is false, or all accessories are back on the table is dangerous. You need a habit of checking specific law. First, know if you deal with federal or state law. Second, know if it was constitutional or statutory. Third, know if the ruling was broad or narrow. Fourth, check if items are banned under other rules. Fifth, if your situation is serious, stop guessing and call a real attorney in your state. Legal confusion turns into criminal exposure when you transport items across state lines based on headlines. Congress can still act. State legislatures can still act. Agencies can issue other rules within court limits. If you think this story ends with one opinion, it does not. The law is still moving. Information could expire after the next round of legislation. Subscribe now because the next video explains more. The bottom line is, the court knocked out the federal bump stock rule because the ATF stretched the statute. But it did not erase every gun law, and it did not make state bans disappear. The people who stay safe are not the loudest ones online. They are the people who read past the headline. If this video helped you, subscribe right now. I spend the time digging through cases for you. Remember, this video is for education only. It is not legal advice. Always check your state laws.